Hello, my dear friends and family. I'm Operator Starsky, and today we're going to talk about something that honestly sounds a bit crazy, but it's already happening. The Russian terrorists preparing to launch up to 1,000 Shahed drones per day at Ukraine. The information came from different sources, including Ukrainian military intelligence and Ukrainian leadership. And honestly, just a couple of days ago, the Russian terrorists already tried something very close to that number. They launched around 948 drones in a single day, which is basically a tragic record for this war. The idea behind it is very simple. They want to overwhelm Ukrainian air defense. They want to send so many targets into the sky that it becomes physically impossible to shoot everything down. Because even if you intercept 95% of those drones, the remaining 5% will still hit something, and that is exactly what the Russians are trying to do. In the beginning of the war, Ukraine was defending against these drones mostly using expensive systems. We're talking missiles, short-range missiles, long-range missiles, etc. Those were missiles from partners. A single Shahed drone costs, depending on different estimates, somewhere between $20,000 to maybe $50,000. We're talking Iranian Shaheds. Sometimes more if we talk about Russian production, between $70,000 and $90,000. But that is still cheap. Now, what do you use to shoot it down? A missile that costs millions, and that is currently the problem that the United States and their allies are facing in the Middle East. For example, a single missile for a Patriot system costs about $4 million. So basically, you're spending millions to destroy something that costs tens of thousands of dollars. And you don't need to be a mathematician to understand that this is not sustainable. And that is exactly what the Russian terrorists were betting on. They thought that we will just spam these drones until Ukraine runs out of expensive missiles and basically collapses. As always, Russian terrorists underestimated Ukraine because Ukraine adapted, and Ukraine adapted very fast. Instead of relying only on expensive Western systems, Ukraine started building its own solutions, which are cheap interceptor drones. Right now, Ukraine is producing interceptor drones that cost around $1,000 to $2,500 per unit. For example, the P-1 Sun drone, about $1,000, the Sting interceptor, just a bit more than $2,000. Some slightly more advanced ones can cost more, but still, we are talking thousands, not millions of dollars like in Patriot systems. Let's do a very simple calculation. If Russian terrorists launch 1,000 Shaheds per day, even if we take a lower estimate, which is, let's say, $30,000 per drone, which is unrealistic, that's already $30 million per day, every single day. And if it's closer to $50,000, that's already $50 million per day spent by Russia for nothing. And now Ukraine, to intercept those 1,000 drones, that's about $1.5 million. So what do we see here? Russia is spending tens of millions, while Ukraine can comfortably spend $1.5, maybe $2 million to deflect a single attack. The situation completely shifted since 2022 because for the first time in this war, Ukraine is actually winning the war of economy. This is exactly why this topic is so important, because modern war is not only about weapons and manpower, it's also about economy. That's exactly how the World War I and World War II basically ended. But there is another very, very interesting detail, my friends. These Ukrainian interceptor drones are now in huge demand worldwide, not only in Ukraine, but also countries in the Middle East, the United States. They all face the same problem. The United States were spending thousands of Patriot missiles to intercept those drones, sometimes shooting up to 8 missiles per target, which is completely crazy. And today, a lot of countries, the Middle Eastern countries as well as the United States are looking at Ukraine because Ukraine already solved this problem. In fact, Ukraine has already sent drone operators and technology to help defend US bases in the Middle East as well as strategic objects in the Middle East countries. So now Ukraine is not only defending itself, my friends, it is exporting experience, and this is something completely new. And now let's talk about Russian economy, because this is where things get absolutely interesting. Russian terrorists can undoubtedly launch thousands of drones, but that costs a lot of money. And at the same time, their economy is under pressure. It's not a secret that the prices are growing inside the destitute Russia. We can see the tax increases that were also recently announced to fund the war. We see problems with fuel. We see more and more pressure on ordinary Russian people that are so happy nowadays to see the price they pay for this invasion. Putin's war is expensive, and when you are spending tens of millions every day just on drones, it adds up very quickly. But there is another big problem for Russians, which is oil, because Russian economy depends heavily on oil exports, and Ukraine is actively targeting this sector. There are already reports that Ukrainian strikes have significantly damaged Russian oil infrastructure. In some cases, up to 40% of export-related capacity has been affected, which means less money coming into Russian budget. But at the same time, more money going out for war, which is not a good combination. So what do we have now? Russian terrorists try to win by numbers, by mass, by throwing hundreds and thousands of drones at Ukrainian cities, but Ukraine answers that with something smarter and cheaper. And this is something very, very hard to counter, especially if you're a Russian Federation under sanctions, struggling with finding parts and different electronic warfare measures for their drones, etc., etc. And honestly, this war is showing something very important to the whole world. Future wars will not be about who has the most expensive weapons, they will be about who can produce faster, adapt faster, who can think faster, who can innovate, and right now Ukraine is doing exactly that. So, my dear friends and family, the threat is real. The Russian terrorists are increasing their attacks and they're trying to overwhelm Ukrainian air defense. But at the same time, Ukraine is finding ways not just to survive, but to outplay them. And that's something very important to understand. 1,000 drones per day, that is absolutely crazy. The Russian deficit in terms of oil export has reached about 1 trillion rubles, which accidentally is equal to what Russia is getting from its tax raises, that is exactly 1 trillion rubles, collected from the happy Russian population to fund Putin's war. If, God forbid, I was a Russian citizen, I would definitely think a bit more about this one, about the future, about the opportunities, but at the same time, I know Russians really well, and I can tell you that it's not the case. And Russia is facing its inevitable collapse 100%, which will be very, very dramatic, but very enjoyable to watch as well. With that, my dear friends and family, I wish you all a beautiful day. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe and share this content. It really helps Ukraine be heard. I'll see you in the commentaries. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, thanks for watching.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.